Hello, hello. So I don't typically plug my Patreon, but in an effort to grow all of my stuff more, I would really like to take this moment to plug my Patreon. And what I'll be doing is at any tier, if you sign up at any tier, you will have access to some form of coaching. So what that means is you can ask me questions via Patreon or via Discord in our members channel, and you can ask a question with as much or as little context as you want. And I can obviously ask you for clarifying points if necessary. And then I'll make the video and answer the question to the best of my ability. And if I have to do some research, that's awesome for me because it allows me to expand my knowledge and to better answer a question if I'm unsure. And on top of that, I think it's a more affordable way for some people to get coaching, or if they're like stuck with a particular issue, I can do my best to try to help out and also help anyone else out because it's going to be content. And so that's going to be added value for me that I get to share that with other people too. So that's what we're doing on the Patreon. So that's something I just wanted to announce. And with that said, and speaking of like performance coaching and stuff like that, I wanted to remind you guys that one of the most powerful things that you can have for your performance is actually also very affordable, and it's a pen and a paper. And it's funny because this came up the other day. Someone was talking in my Discord about how how can I kind of stay on top of the focuses that I'm setting up for myself throughout the week, and I suggested piece of paper or like sticky notes are really, really powerful. It's something that we did with players, and it's a common thing that coaches do with players where they will, select specific focuses or maybe it's like specific lineups that they want to reference or help to, jog the memory for a player to execute that lineup or practice that lineup. But just this stuff that you can put on your monitor. It's just sticky notes on your monitor. And you can always make a habit of glancing at those if you need to do that to remind yourself of whatever the focus might be. Equally, piece of paper and a pen is really nice because the act of actually writing is helpful in terms of actually embedding things in our memory. And so what's useful there is that it's very easy to forget the points of specifically points that were problematic or things that went well, things that did not go well in the playing sessions. Because in our practice sessions, people often spam games and you're playing and playing and playing and playing. And there's no reviewing. It's usually just playing. And so we often don't get to that spot. And so what we tend to do is we tend to try to hold stuff in our minds as to, okay, what do I think I had an issue with during that game? This is why, usually watching VODs back of yourself is helpful because it's something I discovered very, very early on with demo review was the fact that what I felt like had happened in the game, like the mistakes that I thought that I made in the game that were really impactful. Oh, this is what happened. This is why we lost the game. Completely wrong almost every time, which is very interesting. And it's because when you're actually playing in your perspective, you're only focused on specifically, what you're doing for the most part. Obviously, you have a macro awareness and these types of things, but because you don't have the full information, and you're really focused on executing, all of the mechanics and the decision-making chains, you actually don't have a great perspective on what the actual cause of a loss might actually have been. And the amount of time, I remember doing an exercise with a team that I was on a long, long time ago, where I was getting them all into demo watching, and we would go over this exercise where we would each say, okay, where do you think we lost the game? Like, what do you think were the moments where we lost the game? Most impactful moments. And everyone would give their answers. And then we would go and watch the demo, and we would all just proceed to be wrong. It's funny because it's kind of an emotionally driven thing in a lot of senses. And it's so interesting how different our perspective can be once we have some distance, and also once we're not actually playing, but instead just observing. And that's pretty powerful. So if you're not doing that, I think the least that you can do is to at least try to write stuff down. And you can start off really simple with this if you want to try to use this tool, and just write down whatever comes to mind. That in of itself is quite helpful because your mind will have thoughts that are probably valuable, but you will forget them as over the course of the session. So having a moment to just whilst you're in you're picking your heroes, you're in the the buy time, you're waiting to connect to the server, you're selecting the map, like whatever downtime you have, just being able to jot down, even if it's just what went well, what didn't go well, what I did well, what I didn't do well, is nice because you're beginning to map out things about your performance. And this segues nicely into this idea of the ABC game. So this requires a full video, but this is something that helps towards that, because the ABC game is for, if you haven't ever heard of it before, and I've talked about it a lot. The ABC game is this idea that our performance is a range. It's a range. So on any given day, you can be anywhere in this range, and during the playing day, you can go up the range, you can go down the range. And that's interesting in of itself. But each part of this range is characterized by certain things. Like, for example, the absolute best performance you could ever have is characterized by really good decision making. You're in the flow. You just can predict everything that's happening. You feel like super dialed in. You're happy. Emotionally, you feel good, like you're energized. There's all of these different things that you can witness when it comes to the way that you're making decisions. So what areas of the game is in front of you? Why is it that for right now, all of the situations you're in, you just understand them perfectly. And so that gives you the opportunity to be in your A game from a decision-making standpoint. And then you're able to be in your A game from the more physiological standpoint. So let's say, your mood is up, you're good, you're very focused, you're energetic, you're calm, whatever it is when you're in your A game. And so you can take note of what that state is like. And then similarly, you can kind of see also, what's the impact there on your mechanics, what's good or bad about your mechanics in that particular case, what really shines. And so that's one snapshot of your performance. And equally, you can look at the snapshots of when you're in your C game, let's say, just as an extreme example, because what the shittiest version of yourself playing might look like. You know what it feels like. But what if we take a second to try to quantify it and say, well, what types of mistakes do I make when I'm in my C game? This is really powerful, because if you acknowledge that you're in a range, and this is not your fault, it is and it isn't. We're human beings. We are vastly complex biological entities, and we have huge degrees of variation physiologically day to day. And we have so many other things that that are happening in our lives that can impact our energy, our mood, our performance. So it's not reasonable to expect the same level of performance or a specific type of performance. That's not reasonable. So we just need to throw that in the garbage, just throw that in the trash, in the bin straight away. That's the useless way to think. What instead we need to do is we need to just accept where we are in our performance and be curious about it. Don't be stressed about it. Don't try to force something. Don't expect anything. Just look and see what's there and accept it. And that's really helpful, because now that gives us a path to begin to then analyze, well, okay, again, like I said, what types of mistakes do I make when I'm in my C game? So what do I notice otherwise about not just the mistake, but what kind of mechanics what do my mechanics look like? What types of decisions are coming up that I'm struggling to deal with? What type of for example, the type of mistake, it could be, over peaking. For example, so you get greedy. Well, that's really interesting. Well, if we understand that we overpeak, next time that we're in our C game and we notice that we do the overpeak thing, that's a cue that now you understand kind of roughly where you are in your performance range potentially. And so then you can say, okay, one of my goals right now is to address the mistakes I know that I'm making because I'm in my C game. So now my objective is to not overpeak or not re-peak when I'm supposed to reposition instead. And just focus on that one thing. Just focus on that one thing in this particular instance. There's lots of different versions of this. For example, for me, I often say that a good sign for me that I know that I'm too tired to be able to perform at my best is when I make certain types of mistakes. So if I make a mistake, which is something that I know that I've either already fixed, or I know that it's something that is fundamentally just wrong, I just do it and I'm like, oh my God, why did I do that? That usually indicates to me, for myself, that is fatigue. For me, that's an indicator of fatigue. And what that means is I'm not going to get likely any less fatigued. So I'm probably in a state where I'm going to have to manage the fatigue. Obviously, it can be the case that the fatigue can be brought on because of energy levels based on, ingesting food. Maybe did I eat enough? Did I sleep enough? All those kinds of things. And maybe you can kind of solve that with some food. But generally speaking, it's probably going to be the case that I'm just a bit gassed out. And so I have to understand now that I have a limitation. I have a limitation with the fatigue levels. And so once you start to get all of this data, everything starts to calm down, because you're able to see things in terms that, where you can address them. I can address that because I can know that, well, a good solution here is to probably stop playing, unless I'm just playing for a different reason, or I'm playing with friends and it's very casual and I'm not trying to I'm not in a point in my season or I'm not even in season. Maybe I'm in the off season and I don't care necessarily to be super disciplined when I play every single time. Because if you do care about high quality practice where you want to be super disciplined, you need to just not play when you get to that point of fatigue, which causes those mistakes. So, and for example, there's very often, especially when you're performing poorly, an emotional connection to the type of mistake that you're making. And usually it's the mistake on the decision making is probably drawn from that emotional error. And so that's what a mental game leak is. So for example, if for whatever reason you're feeling frustrated, when you're feeling frustrated, you're going to be more likely to make certain types of mistakes. So you might make a mistake that's greedy because you don't have the patience because you're frustrated. And if you're frustrated, well, there's so many different reasons why you could get frustrated. So what is the trigger? That's something we would want to understand, because once we understand whatever that trigger frustration is, we're going to be able to better ourselves and how we manage it so that we're less frustrated. Also, if we understand that we are frustrated, by knowing the types of mistakes we make when we're frustrated, like let's say we are greedy, again, like just using the overpeaking example, then now we can understand that, okay, I know what kinds of mistakes I'm going to try and make because of my current emotional state. So with all of these different considerations, you can start to really solve problems and you can really start to create a way back from the C game potentially to the A game. It's definitely possible. But it's not possible if you don't first accept where you are and then deal with the shit about where you are. That's what you have to do. So with that said, pretty quick video here today. We talked about the pen and paper and, obviously sticky notes and stuff that can be really, really good to help you guys out in terms of keeping your mind focused or having a routine that allows you to consistently reflect on important inflection points or focuses that you need to have going through your day. So with all that said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And again, if the Patreon thing sounds like it might be for you, definitely check that out. And if you want to ask any questions, you can hit me up in the Discord as well. But with that said, thank you guys for watching this very quick one today, and I'll see you all soon.